I learned as a young adult was that self-employment is risky because the income is unpredictable. But the day I got laid off, I lost 100% of my income. I went from salary to zero. The risk of employment is that you're at the mercy of the employer. We have at-will employment in almost every part of this country where they can get rid of you for any reason. And so when I lose a client, it's a fraction of my income. It still stinks, but it's just a portion of my income.
Yeah.
It's not my whole income. So self-employment to me puts me in more control.
Welcome to the Sunlight Tax Podcast. In this show, we're talking about taxes, money, and careers for self-employed people who have a big vision for changing the world with their work. I'm your host, Hannah Cole, artist, design nerd, tax pro, author of Taxes for Humans, and the founder of Sunlight Tax. If you're a creative, wellness, or mission-driven entrepreneur who wants to grow your business sustainably, manage your taxes, and build a stash of fuck you money so you can control your time and have a bigger impact with your work, you are in the right place.
Anna Burgess Yang, thank you so much for being on the Sunlight Tax Podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited to talk to you. I feel like we have a lot in common, but I really wanted to start by just asking you to give the listeners of the Sunlight Tax Podcast a little bit of your story. Will you tell us kind of what the journey is that brought you into solopreneurship?
Sure. And it's not a traditional path or the place that I really thought I would end up. So I started my career in banking. I actually worked at a bank for 6 years. And then right out of college, went to work at a financial technology company that worked with banks. So I was still in the space, but working as a technology provider and helping banks and credit unions across the US implement enterprise software. And I stayed at that company for 15 years. So long time. Right around or during the pandemic, like many people, I was kind of thinking, what else could I do with my life? And it really wasn't something I had considered up until that point because the company, it was small, had very flexible work. It was just a great fit for me that way. But during the pandemic, I really started to just rethink, like, what do I want to do? Is this what I want to be doing? Is this the company I want to be at? The answers to all those things were no. I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I started thinking, what else can I do? Because that was my first job out of college. I hadn't done anything else. So I don't know how exactly, but I somehow landed on content marketing, that people would actually pay me to write for companies. So I got a job at a marketing agency and quit my tech job. And so I was writing mostly for other technology companies in kind of a variety of spaces through this agency. I was only at the agency for about 8 months. The agency just was not a good fit. And I got a job at a different agency, but in more of an account manager role. So doing different type of work and not writing. And I was at that company for about a year and got laid off. And at that point, I had been considering going out on my own, something I'd really never thought about at any point in my life, because with a banking background, I'd always been told that self-employment was risky. But at the time that I got laid off, it seemed like full-time employment was risky. In the tech industry in particular, people were getting laid off right and left. And so I thought, I'd started thinking, like, what would this look like if I went out on my own and did that? And so when I got laid off, I'm like, well, here's the chance. I've got it. The opportunity has presented itself. The timing wasn't my decision, but I think it was a direction I was headed anyway. So I started my own freelance writing business, writing for technology companies. And on the side, I create resources for fellow solopreneurs, because that is something that I'm just very passionate about. I feel like my background coming from company that I came from and the banking experience and things like that give me a really unique perspective on starting a business. I didn't make some of the same mistakes I think some solopreneurs make just because I had that background. And so I really wanted to kind of provide education talk a lot about tools and technology and things to make work easier. And so I create resources and host webinars and workshops and things like that for fellow solopreneurs.
I love it. I really love the way that it does feel like you are helping to kind of lead people through the terrain of solopreneurship. Like this article, gosh, there's so many that I want to ask you about. But I was just reading this article you wrote about skills that you got from working in a corporate environment and how helpful they were in being a solopreneur. And you just reference like the mistakes that you see people make. So can you just outline some of those mistakes that you see solopreneurs make or just struggles that people have when they strike out on their own?
Yeah.
Because I think your
And
kind of experience
yeah,
is
and
really
one thing in particular that I'll add to my corporate experience was when I left, I was an executive. So
Mhm.
I wasn't an individual contributor anymore. I was part of the team that was making decisions about the finances of the company, about the
Mhm.
strategy of the company. And so one of the things I see solopreneurs struggle with is decision making.
Yeah.
Like suddenly you are in charge and everything falls on you, which has benefits. You can change direction. You can try something new. You're not stuck in like red tape that often
Mhm.
comes with corporate decision making, but also you're assuming all of the risk. And so some things I see solopreneurs struggle with is they're just not comfortable making decisions. So they don't act quickly, or they just take too long, or they don't make it at all because they're afraid.
Yeah.
Or that they make decisions like kind of too quickly. And then they're constantly shifting and they're not letting like a decision settle and really decide, is that the right thing, and getting data. They're constantly bouncing between decisions. So that's something I think solopreneurs struggle with a lot. Another
Yeah.
one is like investing in your business. And what I mean by that is I pay for a lot of tools that make my work more efficient because I recognize the trade off is more time for me to do higher value work or spend time with my family or take a nap or whatever, but I think a lot of times solopreneurs, they, they want to keep their money, right? And so paying for tools seems like something that seems like a risk, or they just don't want to. But they don't recognize that lets them do other things that could bring more money into the business. And a
Yeah.
third thing, which I know you talk a lot about, is just being uncomfortable with money
Mhm.
and not knowing how to budget around unpredictable income, or
Mhm.
not even sure like how to keep track of like income and expenses and some things. If you've never done it before, there's not a good foundation for it. So those are some
Yeah.
of the big things that I kind of talk about a lot is, kind of those executive skills, kind of those operations skills, and then financial skills.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. I think both you and I have served some time as a project manager, and I feel
Yes.
like that's a really useful. I've never been an executive, but I mean, except at my own company, but that project management was so difficult and so valuable. Like I really appreciated managing other people, timeline and budget, and that being so clearly something that I needed to keep careful control of. Because man, is it helpful when you work for yourself.
Yes. And I was a product manager, which is a lot of project management as part of my job. And
Mhm.
so I knew when I started my own business, like the day I had 2 clients, I'm like, I need to figure out how to project manage I need to build a system that can handle more than one thing. And it has to be able to
Wow.
continue to grow with me. I can't just
Mhm.
wing it anymore with making sure that things are done on time and, keeping track of multiple client preferences and ways of delivery and all of that. So for sure, project management is a whole big thing that a lot of people, if you've never done it before, it's a very kind of foreign concept.
For sure. For sure. I was just also reading another one of your articles. By the way, I haven't mentioned your Substack. It's called Work Better, and it's great. And anybody who's listening should definitely subscribe to it. But one of the articles, like a headline that really grabbed me was that people don't talk enough about the risks of employment. And I found that so interesting. I mean, I am an artist and I'm not just an artist by training, but also like in my heart and soul. And I think like the strictures of a corporate environment have always uh, grated on me. But it seemed like to me personally, like when studio time was this thing I really preserved fiercely, that the timelines of corporate environment, like just a day job, um, and especially as a woman, things like maternity leave and the complete lack of it, um, it seemed like the only way I would ever get the kind of leave that I really thought was, fair and good was to have my own company. So, would you be willing to just sort of talk a little bit about those the risks as you see them in having a job?
Yeah. So because I worked in banking for a long time and I was a mortgage underwriter really early. And so I was part of assessing risk in borrowers. In banking, it is drilled into you that self-employment is inherently risky. And to a bank, it is because you can't, you want W-2 income because then you know how much the borrower is earning. And it's hard to
Yeah.
tell with self-employment. So that had always just been part of the framework that I grew up with or that I learned as a young adult was that self-employment is risky because the
Mm.
income is unpredictable. But
Yeah.
but the day I got laid off, I lost 100% of my income. I went from salary to zero. And,
Yeah.
you know, unemployment in this country is a joke. It was a painstaking process to file for unemployment in my state. It was a fraction of what I had been earning. And, um, and as soon as I got a freelance role that paid me 1 week, they kicked me off of unemployment, even though the next week I was back to having zero again. So it
So
was just,
awful.
it was a real, it's not built for that type of thing. It's built for you get another job and now you're done with unemployment. But that aside, the risk of employment is that you're at the mercy of the employer. We have, at will employment in almost every part of this country where they can
Mhm.
get rid of you for any reason.
Yeah.
And so when I lose a client, it's a fraction of my income. It still stinks. My clients, their budgets change, their needs change, all kinds of things change. And sometimes without a lot of warning, they may just be like that, we're ending the engagement at the end of this month. But it's just a portion of my income.
Yeah.
It's not my whole income. And so that's part of the reason why I prompted that article is because, from my former banking perspective, I was like, well, that's the more stable income is when you only lose maybe 20% or something like that rather than all of it. And, with getting laid off for most people, I mean, it's immediate. There's no notice period. In a vast majority of cases, there's no notice period. And so even providing a 2 weeks notice, the employer doesn't have to honor that. I've told people before, you have to be prepared that your employer may say, well, we're just going to be done today. And that's it. You have no recourse and you have no protection. So self-employment to me puts me in more control. I have to save, to plan for things like lower client months, but I can choose to do that. And that's just part
Yeah.
of how I run my business.
A lot of financial noise out there, and it's hard to know who to trust or where to turn. But the one single most important thing you can do as a self-employed person for your financial security is to maximize your tax smart accounts every single year. It's about building a simple habit and having the knowledge to know which accounts you should be using and what the rules are for them. But once you do, the benefits are huge. You get a huge savings on taxes when you use them, and that money grows with compound interest faster than your regular investments because of compounding tax savings every year. So come learn from me in a 1-hour course, Save Like a Millionaire, How to Use Tax Smart Accounts on June 23rd at noon Eastern. You can also sign up for the course and get the recording if you can't join live. This is a paid workshop. It's 1 hour. You will get the reference materials and the ability to ask me questions. To reserve a spot in this incredibly valuable paid workshop, it's just $97, or you get 10% off if you are in my paid Substack bookkeeping club. Just go to sunlighttax.com/workshops. I can't wait to see you there and show you how to save a ton of money and do the single most important thing you can do as a self-employed person for your financial security and growing wealth. I'll see you on Tuesday, June 23rd.
Yeah, for sure. Whew, yeah, my husband has worked for startups for his whole career, and he just this year was at a company that closed overnight. Like in the morning, everybody had a job, and at 5 p.m., nobody had a job anymore. The company ended, and there was no notice and no severance. I was like, oh, that was scary. We're okay. Nobody needs to cry for us, but still, it was terrifying, and I felt really bad for everyone at the company.
Yeah.
So I am curious, like, just because I think that I don't have a great sense of like what part of the world your clients are operating in, kind of like what their concerns are and stuff. But I have been just speaking of that, like risk of self-employment versus employment is like the job landscape really feels like it is in a lot of flux right now. And I think that is true if you are an employee and you're just looking at these LinkedIn posts of like massive amounts of layoffs at larger companies, or if you're self-employed and you're just like your clients are all kind of suffering from work that's drying up from AI replacement as mine are. So I'm just kind of curious from you, Anna, like, do you have a sense of like the lay of the land? Like, what does it look like from where you stand right now? What are you seeing in the economy based on who you serve?
So I work mostly with tech companies,
Mhm.
and their work, what they do for their customers, I think is changing. It hasn't
Mhm.
really impacted me in the type of work that I do for them, because I do a lot of like interview based work. So I talk to people and like write up a journalist style article about it and things like that. So there's still, I think, a need for that type of writing.
Mhm.
Um, but I I do kind of wonder, at what point some of the things that I'm seeing from other people are going to trickle down and hit
Mhm.
me in some shape or form. A lot of my friends are in similar writing type of roles, but maybe internal at a company. Many of them have been laid off, or their roles have changed substantially as the company itself has pushed employees to use more AI. So they're like, this isn't what I signed up for. And so I a little bit feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, and maybe something's going to hit me at some point, but so far it hasn't. And which is great. But
Yeah.
it's hitting so many people I know in so many ways that are heartbreaking, because again, if you're working for an employer, it's just, the impact is kind of immediate if something happens to your job. And then, some freelancers I know are struggling to find the type of work that they were doing before.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. What I have been noticing is it's so individual. Like there are
Yeah.
people who are doing fine and maybe they're in an industry that's relatively untouched and they kind of aren't noticing all of this stuff. And then there's people like me, like my income dropped very dramatically this year and I have just been like, what's happening? What's going on? And it's hard to even get the data about it, you know? My brother works in Washington D.C. He worked at a large non-governmental organization funded by the State Department, and you can imagine what happened to him 6 months ago. He
Yeah.
lost his job because of Doge. He was actually personally doxxed by Elon
Oh,
Musk.
no.
His name and salary tweeted by Elon Musk. So that was a little voyage for him. So like, yeah, I mean, there's like people in government, people in the creative economy. It's just tech workers. It's interesting how it's spotty.
And it puts everyone on edge, I think,
Yes.
because you wonder. Um, One of my siblings works for a very large tech company that kind of has rolling layoffs. And every single time I have to send a text message like, "Are you okay?"
Wow.
Because it just kind of keeps everybody scared all the time, wondering if they're gonna be in the next round of cuts, maybe if they made it through this round. And so
Mhm.
we're all operating. I actually wrote about this recently too. We're all kind of operating in a culture of fear,
Yeah.
and like that we can't quite settle, or it's hard to make plans, like even in your personal life, because you're worried about what your professional, like, is your professional life still going to be there 3 months from now, 6 months from now.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And yet, I do find especially as a business owner, I want to approach the world and my work with a sense of optimism. It's getting harder. It's like actually kind of hard to be optimistic. I think it's not unreasonable and it's absolutely possible, but I'm just noticing that in myself. There is a gloom like around us and a fear. Yeah.
And I talk to people quite a bit who are maybe considering starting, going out on their own. Maybe they lost their job or they just can't take it anymore. And, I'm very upfront about, the ups and downs of running a business by yourself,
Mm.
but also try to say like your current employer is causing you a lot of stress. It's just a different type of stress. Like it's
Yeah.
stressful. It's stressful either way. It's stressful to
Yeah,
work for an employer and it's stressful to work for yourself. It's just like choose your stress.
for sure. Yeah. Choose what you want to have control over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I know you have like a download that you offer that's about career pivots, helping to coach people through that. You have certainly been through a pretty major one yourself. I'm curious if you just have some wisdom to share about pivoting.
Yeah, the resource you're referring to, I kind of break out what are different ways that people end up pivoting because I consider that I had several pivots. I pivoted from the industry. There's a whole like I'm going to just do something completely different and got out
Mhm.
of a direct tech job and started writing. There's kind of the boredom, like you feel like you've reached the top of maybe what you can do at a company. And I think that partially led to me leaving the company that I was at for 15 years was just there wasn't anywhere else for me to go. Uh,
Yeah.
there's kind of curiosity, like I just really want to grow and change and just see what I can do. And that's maybe what leads people to self-employment.
Mhm.
And then there is a fear-based pivot. Like I'm not sure that this job or this type of work is going to be there
Yeah.
anymore. Maybe I need to upskill or get into a different field or something
Mhm.
before it hits me. And I don't know that we can all predict that. And certainly not everybody's in a position to do any of those things. And I recognize that as well. Like
Yeah.
I had to take a pretty large cut in salary moving from an executive at a tech company to basically the lowest level writer at a content agency. And had to plan for that. Like, is that even feasible? What do I need to earn
Mhm.
versus what can I earn in like a year or two, which is much different.
What an interesting decision-making process to go through, because I think a lot of people would just take those 2 data points. What am I earning right now? What will I be earning tomorrow when I start this venture? But you're wise to think it through a year, 2 years down the line. How did that look different from day 1?
And I told my husband when I made that, because we knew what the offer was and what I was going to be making.
Yeah.
And then when I went self-employed, I said,
Mhm.
"Give me 6 months." Like, if I
Mhm.
can't not to replace my salary, but to have enough momentum that this seems possible. But
Yeah.
if I hadn't been able to get clients or, like, that seemed like this wasn't gonna work, I would have gone out and found another job. Like, we have a mortgage and we have kids and things like we have things to pay for.
Yeah.
But I knew that what I was going I had to we had enough cushion or we kind of planned enough to kind of float the difference until my earnings got back up to what they were previously. So,
Hmm.
but you have to think about that math, right? Like, what can you if you can afford to take less? How long can you afford to take less?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think planning those timelines is really I've been thinking a lot about predicting the future, partly because the whole world is trying to do it right now with AI and nobody can. And yeah, just like, okay, well, realistically, in 3 months, will I have figured out this problem that I'm currently working on? I'm like, I think the first year you try something, that's really hard math. But once you've kind of been in it, like I have had my company for 10 years now, I kind of have a good sense of like how long a project might take me. That's getting easier, I guess, is my point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always
Uh,
tell people also when I talk to them about that math of changing from corporate to solopreneur is
mhm.
like what you need is not the same as what you're earning today. Like what are the non-essential things that you can cut for a period
Mhm.
of time and still be okay to kind of
Yeah.
get you through that initial 6 months period or however long it might be. And it's not saying cut these things forever. It's saying how much could you scale back and what
Mhm.
do you absolutely need to pay for
Yeah,
until your business kind of picks up and you find your rhythm and your clients and things like that.
for sure. Yeah, that is really it's a good exercise to do. I mean, we have done it as a family in these last few months, just like cut things as much as we can, and it's not at a place where we absolutely need to be doing it, but it actually feels really good to do anyway. To just be like because we've both been having this conversation of what is happiness? Like we can't not earn money. That's off the
Right.
table for us. But
Huge
we don't have
capitalism.
to. Yeah, right. It would be nice. But I feel and I love my work. Really, truly I do. Sometimes I just need like a little rest, but it's to me like it's a dosing problem. I don't want to have to work so hard that I don't get to sleep or enjoy weekends, but if I work a reasonable number of hours, I love what I do. So, I think it's a really interesting question of like, well, what is actually I find that digging into your budget can actually be a real question, a real discussion about what brings you joy. And that is a really good conversation to have, whether it's,
Yeah.
alone with yourself or with a partner. Because, man, it's funny how much you can kind of autopilot on your spending and then not really think about, well, is this actually bringing joy and value to my life? Or is like, I don't know, grinding my coffee beans and having a really wonderful coffee at home every day rather than out totally pleasant.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
because I've come from, banking background and I worked in that space for so long,
Uh-huh.
both like for my business and for my home life, I basically have 3 budgets, like a worst
Mm.
case scenario, and then
Uh-huh.
kinda like where we operate all the time, and then like, well, what happens if I have a really good month in my business? Like, what might we do with extra money? Do I do something in my business? Or do we do something as a family? But that way, I'm not making decisions out of like snap decision or an
Yeah,
emotional reaction. I'm like,
for sure.
okay, if I lose a big client and I can't get one night right away, I just move down to the bare minimum, budget
Mhm.
and operate on that for a while, but that's already planned out for me.
That's really
So
smart.
yeah, so I have this spreadsheet of like low, medium, high, operating on medium all the time, and then could easily move to low or high and just know exactly what I need to cut or what I need to change if I'm in that
Mhm.
situation.
That's great. That's great. I love it. I actually want to, it strikes me as I was reading through some of your posts on Substack that you really do feel comfort in the financial realm. Like you were talking about one of the skills you had in your corporate job was reading a profit and loss statement. And a lot of people that I work with don't know, maybe don't even know what a profit and loss statement is. It's one of the three financial statements that you get from accounting software. It's the one that tells you how much profit you made in a given period. So I'm just curious where you learned how to do that.
So some of it came from working at a bank, even though I was on mortgage, which is on the
Hmm.
consumer side, but I
Hmm.
often had to look at a borrower's tax return. And so
Mm.
if they were self-employed, I was looking at the part of their tax return that was income versus expenses. So I
Yeah.
had kind of a baseline understanding of what a self-employed person reported on their taxes.
Hmm.
And then when I started working for the financial technology company, part of the software was entering a profit and loss statement. So it was the bank taking the tax return from their borrower, plugging the numbers into the product that I was teaching them how to use, and then
Hmm.
getting numbers. So they were analyzing commercial borrowers, so all business.
Got it.
And so I was teaching bankers they knew how to analyze. I was teaching them the data entry part to get it
Mm.
into the product so that they could look at ratios and things like that. So through that, I kind of backwards learned it. Like I knew how the software worked.
Yeah.
The bankers knew how to the profit loss and just in conversation with them and in having to teach the product, I learned
Uh-huh.
about balance sheet, profit and loss, different cash flow statements, and things like
Mm.
that. And so by the time I went out on my own, I managed my own finances for several years before I finally hired a bookkeeper, but I was comfortable doing it because I'd seen it hundreds and hundreds of times before.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. It's so good. I mean, it's really powerful. It's like really great knowledge base. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned, or you've come close to mentioning a few times mortgages and self-employment being risky to the bank. And I just, from the opposite side of that equation, sits me, somebody who, used to do taxes. Now I teach taxes exclusively, but I used to also do the taxes for self-employed people. And there's this really interesting conversation that would really shift the way that people orient towards their taxes and their deductions when they were interested in getting a mortgage. And it was because of how, yes, conservative banks are, and that maybe you just started your business this year, you are not getting a mortgage with only 1 year of
2 years.
um, yeah, and it's like much more conservative timelines that you need to show the bank when you're self-employed. Like I've seen banks that require 3 years of profit and loss statements. And
Because
I don't know if
usually they'll want 2 full years. So
Hmm,
nobody starts their business on January 1st.
there
So
you go. Mhm,
that's why it ends up usually trickling into 3 years because you don't have 2 full years of
mhm.
returns. So
Yeah. There's a real temptation when you're self-employed to more or less get your income, reportable taxable income, as low as humanly
yep.
possible. And of course, we all understand why that temptation is there. You want to pay lower taxes. Life is risky when you're self-employed and you want to, report as little income and pay as little tax as you can. But there is another side there. When you want a mortgage, when you want to draw on your Social Security and Medicare, you need to have been paying into the system at a higher rate, at a higher level. You need to have been reporting a higher amount of income in order to get a mortgage or a bank loan. And so it is not always the right answer. Sometimes it feels like the right answer is only report maximum expenses, put everything on that Schedule C that you possibly can. And that isn't always the right answer. This is the time where you want to be really cautious and sometimes be like, you have some leeway in how many expenses you actually report. You don't have to put every expense you had on your tax return. You can report a higher taxable income. Um,
Yeah. And I was
that was,
very lucky. My husband and I had just refinanced our house like a couple of months before I got laid off. So at the
oh,
time,
wow.
I was a W-2 employee. And
Whew.
because that was when interest rates were really low. They're not so much anymore, but we really got lucky in that regard
Mhm.
because it would have been probably a non-starter to put our house on just my husband's income without any real support from me because we would have had to wait years to be able to
Yeah,
show that.
man. It's so good to know. And it's really like, it's not that many people who know 3 years in advance that they're going to, in 3 years, be applying for a mortgage. But it is just good if Anna and I right now, dear listener, can put that tickle in your brain. It's good to be aware of it.
Yeah, or if you're thinking about leaving your job and also thinking about refinancing or buying a house, maybe do that before you become self-employed because the
For
bank can't
sure.
do anything once the loan is closed. Like you can do whatever you want. They don't follow up. You don't have
Mm.
to reprove your income at all ever again until you refinance. So you're fine. You could literally lose your job the next day and the bank won't know.
Wow, that's kind of incredible, isn't it?
And it's
Mm,
so different for consumer versus business because part of the
mm,
reason I saw so many tax returns is businesses have to reprovide income or their profit and loss and all that every year to the bank.
mhm.
It's part of their loan agreement. It's not for consumer, for more personal mortgages. You whatever it is on the day of close, that's it. So
Wow,
unless
it's so
unless you're financed
interesting.
to buy a different house, you don't have to do it again.
Wow, that is kind of incredible. Wow, this has been so interesting to me. I really think there are some juicy things, especially about the financial side of managing your self-employment. And I encourage everyone to go check out Anna's Substack, which really has some great pieces about the journey of self-employment and some real skills that you can obtain. Anna, can you tell people where they can find you?
Yeah. So my Substack, as you mentioned, I'm sure you'll link in the show notes, but that's workbetter.media. I'm on LinkedIn, Anna Burgess Yang. There's only one of me. So I'm easy to find there. And my website, annabyyang.com, has links to everything. I've got a blog on top of, I write kind of an obsessive amount. And so I have a blog, I have a newsletter, I have a Substack, I have a tutorials website, I have a YouTube. Like, there's a lot. I produce a lot of content.
It's amazing. It is really amazing. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us here on the Sunlight Tax Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah. Great to chat with you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. It really helps. I'm so grateful. My tax guide, Taxes for Humans, is available wherever you buy books and at sunlighttax.com/book. This podcast is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links I reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.